How tall are you? 7 feet tall?
6'7".
6'7". They always made you seem like you were a giant or something, but still.
Well, Mike's a normal sized giant. We're both giants, but I'm just bigger.
Yeah. Jim is one of the few guys who can look Steve Rude in the eye.
Yes, actually look down a little bit. Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway,
nice.
Jim is probably the youngest professional to ever break into Major Stream Comics, selling his first stories to DC when he was 14 years old.
13.
I told you.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And how long after that did you join the staff?
Well, I sent in the first script trying to get a job, and I got a letter back saying send us another one. So I sent a 2-parter, 2 issues, and then I got a call from the editor, and he said we're going to buy these and publish them, and I want to start using you as a regular writer. And he said your first assignment is Supergirl, 12 pages next Friday. So and from that point on, they kept me busy every minute they could, and I was in high school. I mean, I couldn't spend all day doing it, but I worked my way through high school.
Mike used to draw out the actual pages and do the word balloons. Isn't that how you started? Because you didn't know how to do a different kind of script. You actually drew the pages and the word balloons. And
I didn't know there was a script. I just tried to make it look as much like a comic book as I could. I even designed a cover, and I colored the cover with my colored pencils so they know just what I wanted it to look like.
Yeah.
And but they liked that. They liked that they used all my covers. The artists loved my little layouts because it made their work easier. A lot of writers don't think visually, and so they'll have a guy answering the phone while he's lighting his pipe, and they'll pick angles that are weird. And
every writer and artist that I know loves that method of writing comics.
Yeah, Archie used to do that. Archie Goodwin. Yeah, he did that all the time.
You can go. I just wanted to hit that because I knew that's the way you started, and now Mike's like, no, I'm not writing any comics like that anymore.
Well, no, I'll draw if I have to, but the problem is that you have to train to draw without breaking your back, and I never had a drawing table. I just bend over a horizontal surface, and you spend hours doing that. It messes up your back. But I evolved a script style, which is very terse and direct, and people like it just fine. But if I were to go back to writing comics that way, people would love it. And Jim, did you continue to write comics? How long did you continue to write comics visually by drawing each page out?
I did that the entire time I was at DC, so that was about the first 5 years. I did it sporadically after that, but like you, I developed a script approach. My scripts are as thick as a Manhattan directory used to be, and I provide the artist all of the reference because they're not going to look it up, and I describe things fully. I mean, when there's a fight scene or something like that, I choreograph the whole thing, and they also when necessary, even in a full script, I'll do a little scribble if I think that it needs clarification. I'll do a little scribble and just put it right into the Word doc.
Are you working on any comics right now?
I'm working on comics related now, but no, not regular comics. There's not much opportunity right now with regular comics, and they don't want me anyway.
No, of course not.
But I do some indie stuff once in a while just for fun. They're usually for free because they don't have any money. And they say, well, would you write a story? Sure. What's your rate? And I say, well, what can you afford? And they say, well, we can go as high as $12 a page. I'll do it for free. Give that to the artist. Yeah. So anyway, that's once in a while for fun. Meanwhile, I'm doing some Hollywood stuff that it pays real well. It's fun. It's comics related.
Can you tell us what that is?
Not really, but it's I have a series that's going to be on one of the streaming services. They tell me, I believe it. Yeah. When the check clears, I'll let you know.
Right.
I have a movie, a screenplay that's pending at one of the big studios, and they asked me to work on another streaming series thing. You know what? I don't know what you call this. Netflix,
right?
Those things.
It's a
Right.
streaming service.
Yeah.
Some
Yeah.
people call it a steaming service.
Oh, whatever. Anyway, so they keep me real busy. I'm busy every day, and then I go to these conventions. I didn't used to. I didn't have anything to promote, but recently I've been asked a lot, and then my agent found out that I drew a little bit, and I call her she who must be obeyed, and she said, "Well, you're doing sketches," and I'm like, I don't mind, you know, but I'm doing sketches, you know. So I mean, they're not like, you know, top quality professional artists, but they're, you know, I try to make them fun.
How long were you at DC before you moved over to Marvel?
I was at DC for 5 years. Then I did advertising comics for a couple years for like U.S. Steel, Levi's Jeans, places like that. Then I started getting a little freelance, both from Marvel and DC. DC wanted me exclusively for 2 years. That would have been 74, 75, something like that. And then in 76, Marv Wolfman called me up and asked me if I'd consider an editorial position. I said, okay. So he hired me. He was explaining this great new idea he had that the books were coming in finished because there were no editors at Marvel. And so a writer would send the plot directly to the penciler, write the script, send it to the letterer, you know, and the book would arrive finished, which was a nightmare because if there were mistakes and stuff, it all had to be redone in production. It was bad. So Marv came up with this brilliant idea. He said, "We'll call you the pre-proofer, and you'll look at the plots and the scripts before it's a finished book." You know, I said, "You want me to edit the books?" He said, "Well, I don't want to call you editor." I said, "I don't care what you call me, as long as you pay me." You know,
Yeah.
whatever. So I was associate editor, but I was editing the books.
You have a reputation as being the man who made the trains run on time.
Well, that was after I became editor-in-chief. First, I was just the editor, and I didn't really have a lot of authority. Just enough to, you know, piss off a few guys who were used to anarchy and not having anyone tell them anything.
Yeah.
But then when I became editor-in-chief, I assessed the situation, and the situation sucked. It was, we had, everything was late. And, you know, when a book is late, you schedule your time at the separator. You schedule your time at the printer. And if that book doesn't get there, you pay anyway. And so we were losing hundreds of thousands of dollars with that. Because in the first month, my first month on the job, we were supposed to publish 45 color comics. Only 26 made it out the door. Is that bad? Yes. So I said, well, that's going to change, you know, and I did make the trains run on time. And at first everybody was all grumpy with me and stuff. And I tell a guy, look, you're only delivering 2 scripts a month, but you're assigned 3 books. Give one up and catch up on the other 2. And well, you're cutting my income. No, you only get paid for what you deliver, pal, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, sometimes creators are not too tuned in. And anyway, we did get it on time. We saved a lot of money, and I used that money to pay the artists more and the writers more. Doubled the rates, doubled them again. Started introducing all kinds of benefits and stuff, and then they liked the idea of, you know, being on time and, you know, running it like a professional outfit.
It doesn't take that long to write a comic.
Well, it depends. You know,
It depends on your method, but I always compared writing a comic to writing a novel as the difference between water skiing and skiing down Mount Everest.
Well, some guys, it takes longer than others. Archie was slow, but he was excellent. Claremont seemed to be able to do 3 or 4 a month, but, you know, without too much trouble. I'm fairly fast, but like I said, I do all the research and stuff for the guys, so it takes me a little longer than just, you know, thinking up the story and putting down the essentials.
Let's talk about your approach to storytelling. Is there an ideal number of panels that should appear on a page?
No, it's whatever is necessary to tell the story. Tell it clearly at a glance. A lot of people think that you do these fancy, crazy page layouts, that's more sophisticated. No, that's less sophisticated. More sophisticated is when anyone in the world can pick it up and read it effortlessly. That's sophisticated. And so I preach that. I don't tell anybody you can't do this or you must do that, because you can do anything if you set it up. You know, Mike, I mean, if you want some trick shot and you set it up so that when the person looks at it, it's clear at a glance, fine. Do anything you want. Kirby did it all the time.
You worked with Kirby, right?
Yeah, for 2.5 years. When I came in as editor, he had signed a contract to work for 3 years for Marvel, and so he'd been there 6 months. During which he was supposed to be his own editor. That was only so that people didn't mess with his books. But the people before me largely took that to mean they didn't have to care about it, and the stuff just went out, even if there were mistakes and stuff, and it didn't matter. I thought I can't let that happen. So I'd call him up every time a book would come in once a week. He did 4 books a month, pencil and script. And every time a book would come in, you'd take it out of the envelope, and the whole room would smell like cigar smoke, you know. And all right, so I go over these things, and then I'd call him up, and I'd spend an hour, sometimes 3 to 5 hours a week on the phone with Jack going over this stuff. And, the first thing I'd always ask him is it okay if I take out some of these exclamation points? Because he would end every sentence with 6 exclamation points. And you do that, young man, and, I would catch some mistakes and stuff sometimes. And he was always happy. He never argued with me. Anything I said, he was, oh, well, that's a good idea, and then, at the end, he'd thank me for helping him. And then sometimes I got to talk to him about, like, well, why'd you pick this angle? Or what were you thinking here? And he was sharp as a tack when he was talking shop.
Did Jack write by going from panel to panel, making it up as he went along?
I think he, yes, mostly. I think he had a plan. He would make some kind of super rough plan, and then he would just wing it as he wrote through it. That, and it looked that way too. But I know he had the whole story figured out and paced out, at least in his mind, before he started.
Many acolytes sought him out. Mark Evanier and Steve Rube were 2 of them.
Yeah.
Evanier has a huge collection of Kirby art. Did you ever work with Evanier?
I know him. I mean, he would be around sometimes. I think he wrote 1 or 2 stories for us that I wasn't thrilled. But he was steeped in the comics. He considered himself a historian, and he wrote, I guess, books about it and so forth. I guess he like everybody knew. I mean, last time I saw him, we were in court. I was an expert witness about copyright, and he was on the other side.
Ooh.
Who had brought suit against whom?
Marv Wolfman was suing Marvel Comics over ownership of Blade.
I remember that.
And Mark Evanier was his expert witness. And I didn't even want to be involved, but the Marvel lawyers said, all we want you to do is talk about what Marvel's policies were at that time with regards to work for hire. I said, I can do that, so I did. And and the Marvel prevailed.
Who were some of the new talents that you brought in?
Some of the talents I brought in?
Yes.
Oh, well, let's see. There was Bill Sienkiewicz and this newfangled John Byrne guy, and Frank Miller, David Mazzucchelli. I don't know, way too many to talk about. There was a lot of colorists and support troops too, but the main ones. I got Simonson back. I got Starlin back. I got Englehart back. Roy got mad at me and quit for a while, but then I got him back. I got David Michelinie. It was at DC. Got him.
Yeah.
We had some of the other artists, some of the Brits, they'd worked for DC for a while, decide they didn't like it and come to work for us. Yeah, I mean, it was an amazing group of people. And we also developed some, we grew them in a vat. We had this intern named Jim Owsley, high school intern. Interns do little errands and stuff all the time. So he comes in on roller skates, Fortunately, the upstairs people, the executive upstairs, they never came down to our floor because that was the jungle where the weird creatures were, So if any of them had seen that, they probably would have thrown a fit about the insurance and so far. I didn't care. It's a comic book company,
You had artists actually drawing the comics at the Marvel offices during your tenure, didn't you?
Not usually. I mean, we had a couple drawing boards that guys could use when they came in, maybe to do a cover if we needed one right away, or sometimes it's a finished the last page or something. But mostly people worked at home. The bullpen was largely just production guys and letter corrections guys. We had a staff colorist or two staff colorists. We had let's see, who else? Well, whatever. We had a whole big. Oh yeah, we had the guy who did the typesetting.
Did Marie Severin, was she part of the gang?
Yeah, she was. She was there when I first started as editor. She was there, and John Romita was the art director, and she was kind of, I don't know, I guess they called her staff artist. And then when I took over, it's a funny story. I mean, Saul Brodsky, great man, was one of the founders, a founding father. But he had left to start Skywald, and then when Skywald failed, he needed a gig, and so his good friend Stan Lee kind of invented the job for him. But there wasn't a whole real lot for Saul to do except errands for Stan, basically. And so in the vacuum of power between Archie Goodman and me, Saul just kind of decided he was in charge. And he actually, well, even before that, I mean, previous editors to me had just sort of treated him like he was the boss. Like if they had, because most of the guys before me, they were just like creative guys. They didn't have any business background at all. And so they didn't want to do anything legal, technical, financial, or complicated. And so they would go and give it to Saul, and he was happy to have it because he didn't have a whole lot to do. So just before I took over, John Verporten died. And John Romita left staff to do the Spider-Man newspaper strip. So without talking to me, Saul hires replacements. And he hired Marie as art director and promoted Marie to art director, hired his son-in-law as assistant production manager, and then promoted Lenny Groh, who was a production guy, to manager. So I come in with like 3 key people that I didn't hire. Lenny, okay, he lasted a while. As soon as I came in, the son-in-law quit. I guess he was afraid of me. The thing with Marie is that she took the title of art director seriously. And at least at Marvel, the editor is the art director for the books. And so we had a little bit of friction there. Because, I mean, one time she didn't like the way Walt Simonson drew something, so she redrew one of his panels. Oh. You should have seen Walt. I mean, lost his mind. And I was saying, Ray, you can't do that. That's not what we're going to do here. And she would get upset with me. And so then the president of the company finally catches on that Saul doesn't have a whole hell of what to do. So because I didn't have to go to him. I knew how to handle some of this stuff. And if I had a business question, I'd ask the financial officer, Barry Kaplan. If I had a legal question, I'd ask Alice Lannerfeld. I mean, I didn't need to go to Saul and have him ask Barry or him ask Alice. It wasn't necessary. So the president of the company calls me upstairs one day and he sits me down and he says, "What does Saul do?" Stuff for Stan, and he says, "Do you have any?" He didn't want to get rid of him or anything. He was a founding father. I mean, even he respected that. He never opened a comic book in his life, but he said, "Do you have anything you could give him?" And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what. He could take all this little peripheral stuff off my hands because it's killing me. I have enough to worry about just trying to get these comics on time." I said he could do the Hostess Twinkie ads. He could do you take care of the newspaper strips. He could take care of anything that Stan needs, like he does need presentation materials and stuff like that. And there's other sort of miscellaneous artwork and things that are needed. I said if he wants to do that would be great for me. So they invented instead of calling him vice president of operations, which meant he was changing door locks and light bulbs. He was special projects or something, vice president of special projects, and he needed an art director. And so I made him a deal. I said, "Why don't you take Marie? Because you and Marie get along like crazy, and we're having a little bit of friction." And so Marie went to work for him, and that went fine. And that was just tremendous. He got along famously with her. I did too. Once we weren't butting heads, I always loved Marie. I thought she was one of the best things that ever happened on the national treasure. But anyway, so I mean, I had to weed through all this stuff. I mean, it wasn't just sit down and run the comics. I had to. Then there was Neil was organizing a guild. They're going to go on strike. Oh my God! And I said, Neil, give me a chance. Come on. He was a friend of mine. He used to invite me to his parties. I'm management, he's labor, and he's inviting me to his parties and stuff because he knew I had the same sensibilities as he did, that I wanted it to be fair and I wanted it to be good and so forth. But he thought he was going to be able to put pressure on them and help me. No, it's making it harder.
I did have a question because Louise brought it up, and I didn't know if it was true. It makes sense to me, but she said that you liked it if your editors also wrote.
Well, yeah, I like that because I always felt it was good to keep your hand in, just to keep facing the same problems that your creators did, and I didn't demand that they write. I didn't say how much they had to write, but I always liked it if they did something. And Louise ended up doing a couple of really great things. That's one good thing that happened to me is that the whole rest of the industry was dying when I took over. Yeah. In 1978, January 1978 is where I took over. Then in that year, Warren went out of business, Charlton went out of business, Harvey stopped publishing, Archie went all reprint, and on one day, DC canceled 40% of their titles. Wow. So what that meant is that the streets are just full of unemployed talent. Yeah, and I was able to get Al Milgram, Larry Hama. It's like winning the lottery. I got Louise because Warren went out of business. That's better than Christmas. I mean, I got all these great people. I got Archie to come back. He had gone off to be a contract writer, and I convinced him that only he was the best person in the world to run our creator-owned line that I wanted to do.
Was that Epic?
Yeah. Yeah, he did Epic Illustrated Magazine, and he did the Epic Comics eventually. The first one, I said, "Hey, I got a great idea, Arch, Epic Comics." And he says, "You're out of your mind." He said, "I got too much to do already." And then I didn't know what to do. I asked Milgram if he would be interested in doing it. He loved it. Next morning, Goodman comes storming into my office. "How dare you give Epic Comics to somebody I do the creator-owned, I said, "Make up your mind." and so I told Al, and he reluctantly, gave it back to Archie. But so I said, "I'll get you another assistant. I'll help you." And we did.
At some point, it passed into Carl Pott's hands, didn't it?
I think so. I was gone by then. I think after I left, Louise had gotten married to Walt, and they moved upstate, up to Suffern, and then a couple other people, went on their way. And after I left, Archie left eventually, went to DC. Larry left. Louise was gone. So yeah, there was a number of people who bailed out right about then. I guess Carl wound up doing the Epic because he had been he owned an epic comic. He owned Alien Legion.
Alien Legion, yeah.
Yeah, so he was writing that, and Chris Warner, I think, was drawing it.
Were you the one that spearheaded the Marvel graphic novels?
Yeah, that was me. First, 1978. The upstairs executives decided I was presentable, and I obviously could intelligently discuss the comics, and they couldn't. None of them had ever opened a comic book. None of them. The licensing people, the promotion lady, nobody.
Wow.
And the president especially never opened a comic book. So they're going over to Europe to the Frankfurt Book Fair to try to sell stuff they don't even know what it is. And so when they found out I was, presentable, they asked me to come with them, and I all right. So I went to the Frankfurt Book Fair, and so then I got more familiar. I was sort of vaguely familiar with European publishing, but then I started seeing what they, all the various formats and stuff, including his albums, which are sort of, graphic novels. And I thought, why don't we do this? We could do this really well. And so I came back and I got that going. And the first one was Death of Captain Marvel. And then I don't know, Walt did one called Star Slammers, was in there somewhere.
At Marvel's peak, under your direction, how many titles were they publishing a month?
Well, when I started, it was 45. I think when I left, it was more like 70 couple. And also, we had added magazines and the Epic books, and I'm not counting those in with the big number there. And Star Comics, things like that. We were publishing a lot of stuff. I had 14 editors working for me, 14 editors, and each one of them handled between, I guess the least was 5, and the most was probably 7 or 8 titles, depending on a lot of things. I mean, DeFalco was very efficient. He actually handled more releases a year than anyone. And he was like me. One of the trains went on time, and his motto was 4 in the drawer.
Nice. Did you also? I didn't know. I should have researched this, but it's just all coming to me now. Like the limited series.
Yeah, that was us. Yeah, about the same time that DC did their mini series, we did our limited series. I don't know how that came about. I mean, I thought, why can't we just publish, a 6-issue story or 4-issue story, whatever. Yeah. And I guess DC at the same time thought the same thing. Yeah. And away we went. I think our first one might have been Contest of Champions. I don't know.
Yeah, probably. I bring that up because I know a lot of comic store owners, and they really they kind of missed the days of having the limited series where it had number 1 and this many issues and stuff like that. Because now Marvel and DC will technically run a miniseries, but they don't tell the comic stores how many issues it's going to be, or they present it as if it's going to be an ongoing series, and it's just like a nightmare for the comic store owners, and even just the fact of like that they know, and like everybody has to budget their money. It's like, well, if it's only going to be 3 or 4 issues, like you can probably swing that, rather than committing to a whole year of whatever.
I don't think that's strategy on their part. I think they don't know when they start something, because I don't what's up with these guys, but it's like if something's a hit, it's a miracle to them, and they don't know if it's going to be a hit or not. They don't know if it's going to be any good. And I mean, my guys that I had, they knew when it was good,
right?
And if we had a hit, they knew how to make another one. Yeah, and it was. I don't know what these people are thinking right now. I mean, they do stuff that, like I say, it becomes a miniseries because it didn't do well,
right?
And it becomes a miniseries becomes a permanent series because it does well.
You were still doing newsstand distribution at that time, right?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, it was all newsstand in 1978 when I came in as editor-in-chief. As editor-in-chief, I was copied on the print orders, and so I'm trying to figure them out. And there's the newsstand copies, there's the Whitman copies, there's the military copies, there's a subscription, something else, I don't know. And at the bottom is this little thing called Seagate, and it was 100 books or 150 or something of each issue. I thought, what's Seagate? So I went and I asked the circulation director. He closes the door, like doesn't want anybody to hear. He says he was basically selling comics at the back door to a crony, a guy named Phil Silling, and Phil was distributing them to local comic shops. Okay, he was acting as the distributor to local comic shops, because the little comic shops they couldn't get serviced by the IDs, and they couldn't get the new comics. So Phil had made a little distribution business, and Ed Shukin was the circulation director at that time, and he says, "Look, Jim, it's cost plus. It's a deep discount. It's just to get a little more volume. It's nothing. It means nothing." I thought, well, okay, and he said, "Don't tell anybody." I'm like, well, A, who would I tell, and B, I don't know. So anyway, I did start keeping track of it. And I noticed that those numbers went up every month. All the numbers went up every month. And I also noticed that books that we thought were the best sold the best. The fans had good taste.
Right.
X-Men, something else is selling 200, 250. X-Men selling 600, So I'm like, all right. So I'm keeping track of this. And then this guy, Chuck Rosansky, Mile High Comics, he calls me up and asks me if he could meet with me. And I said, all right. Comes in and he says, "I want you to know you're second choice." He said, "I wanted to see the president of the company. He won't talk to me." I said, "There's no way he's ever going to talk to a comic book retailer. Yeah. Gene Colan called him once, and the president calls me and says, 'Who's Gene Colan?' And I said, 'He's an artist.' He's telling him to stop calling me." He actually one time, this is toward the end of my time there, John Byrne called him to complain about me. And he calls me and says, "Who's John Byrne?" He didn't know. He didn't care. But anyway, so Galton was not interested in talking to anybody at comic retailer. Kidding, So Chuck told me, he asked me if I was aware of the direct market. I was, and he said, "Well, it's ridiculous because you can't give one guy an exclusive. That's not even legal. You need to publish trade terms. You need to open it up to anybody who can make the minimums. You can, stuff like that." He had an 11-point plan. So I called the president, Jim Galton, and I see we were on the 6th floor. They were on the 9th. The executives were on the 9th floor, and like I said, they didn't come down there. We had to go up there. So I said, "You got to talk to this guy." And so we went to his office and we had a meeting with him. And by the time that meeting was over, we had enacted 10 of Chuck's 11 points.
Wow.
And so it's that was good. And we did open up in trade terms and all that stuff like that. DC was actually going to be first, and then they backed away because they thought it would piss off their newsstand guys. Then we went into it. And then DC said, "Well, they didn't lose their newsstand, so let's go." So they joined in on the direct market. And the next thing you know, it's booming. And we helped it grow because we were making better books. I had the great editors. They had great talent. We were making better books that helped the direct market. And the rising tide raised all the boats because, it helped DC sell. It enabled a lot of these small publishers to get into business, as you know, Mike. And, and some of them thrived, and some became big publishers like Pacific for a while and First Comics. And of course, then you had all of the, the Cerebus, the ElfQuest, the Distant Soil, Turtles, all that stuff. And it was good for everybody for a while, and everybody was doing really well.
At what point did Diamond enter the picture?
Well, Diamond was one of the original 18. As soon as we opened the trade terms, as soon as we published trade terms and opened it up to anybody, there were 18 distributors, and Diamond was one of them. And then slowly they engulfed and devoured everything else. And I don't blame Steve. Basically, it's a monopoly, but it's because of superior acumen. He outplayed him.
Are you aware of Chuck's recent activities at Mile High Comics?
Oh yeah, sure.
I'm talking about
what do you mean?
The drag shows?
Oh yeah, that's so what? Who cares? I mean, yeah, I actually went to a drag show with him. He wasn't performing. It was around Christmas, and he says to me, "You want to go to a drag show?" And I said, "If you do, sure, okay." So we went, and it turned out to be a charity event for Toys for Tots. It was really kind of funny. All the drag queens and the Marines just all standing there.
Right.
It was
Is
bizarre.
this in New York?
No, it was in Denver, and so I found out that this organization, the local LGBT whatever, they did a lot of charity work. So does Chuck, and so inevitably they kind of ran into each other, and he just got into it. Chuck's at a stage where it's like where he's just wide open. He'll do anything. He's had a couple of near-death experiences, and he's figuring, swing for the fences.
Yeah.
And so he does a tremendous amount of charity work. He'll buy 1,000 pairs of gloves and take them around and give them to homeless people in the winter, stuff like that. So apparently he's having fun doing this. Whatever, knock yourself out.
At what point did Valiant enter the picture?
Well, after Marvel, we were too successful, and so Marvel was owned by a corporation called Cadence Industries. Cadence Industries was publicly traded. The board of directors very evilly, deliberately depressed the price of the stock. They hid income and made it look like everything was going to hell. Why? So they could buy it and take it off the stock market. So they took it private. Originally, there were 7 more, and then they killed one of their own, and it was 6. 6 guys owned Marvel and everything else of Cadence. And so what their plan was to clean up these crummy little failing companies the best they could and sell them off for assets or whatever. They sold Curtis Circulation for receivables for you financial types out there. Yeah. That was just cash out, just get the money. The crown jewel was Marvel, and they had we were really successful, but they carefully kept us as a division as opposed to a subsidiary. Subsidiaries have to report to the SEC separately. Divisions can report as part of the corporation. So they buried all the money we made under corporate expense. And it made it look like Marvel was just barely scratching by. So they were able to depress price the stock, buy it cheap, and then, like I said, they've been selling off these little companies and building up a lot of cash, and so finally it was Marvel's turn. And I told the guys, I said, "You're stupid. I mean, we're building you $1 billion business.
Right?
Let us go. What? Why are you going to sell now?" And they thought they never opened a comic book. They didn't understand the difference between good and bad. They just thought for some miracle we'd started to sell, and they wanted it might be hula hoops, might go away any minute.
Right.
So you better get out while the getting's good. So they sold it for $46.5 million. $46.5 million. Right. Pitiful. A couple years later, they were. The people they sold it to, New World Pictures, which changed its name to New World Entertainment, they were going bankrupt, and they needed to sell something. And so, what did they have that was worth anything? Marvel. So that's when I tried to buy it, and I put together a team, raised the money, and there were 9 people in the second phase of the auction, 9 entities in the second phase of the auction, of which we were one. Marvel Acquisition Partners, and we were the only bidder. We were the only one who actually placed a final bid. The reason the other ones didn't place bids was because they couldn't get management, and the reason I know that is because they all called me, right? And I said, "Oh, sorry, I'm busy," So we put in the only bid. We thought we won for 2 weeks. We're making plans. We loved it, and then we find out. My financial guy calls me up in the morning. He says, "Have you read the journal yet?" I said, "Winston, it's 5:45 in the morning. No, I haven't read the journal." And he's Perlman bought Marvel. I said, "How can that be?" Well, he was an insider at the selling company. He owned a substantial stake of New World Entertainment. So if you're an insider at the selling company, you can't also be a buyer unless you have an arm's length bid. Oh, like say mine. And so we bid $81 million. He bid 82.5, and he would have beaten any bid we made. He wanted to have it. He just needed a stalking horse. So I didn't get that. So now I'm looking for a gig. And I first went to Richard Bernstein at Western, and I knew him because he once looked into buying Marvel and met me and seemed to like me. And so I went to him, and I in order to help raise money, I thought it'd be good if I had some characters, some known characters. So I told him, I said, do you know you have some comic book characters? And he said, I do. I said, yeah, they're really good. I said, I'm going to try to start a publishing company, and he said, well, great, I'll license them to you. And I said, well, I don't have any money yet. And he said, well, I'll hold them for you. And he held them for 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And he had big offers, by the way, because the market was still pretty good, and Marvel was interested, and DC was interested. Mike Richardson will tell you he called him every week trying to get those characters. And but no, he was holding them for me. And so 2 years later, when I finally found a place that would fund a startup contingent on having those characters, it was called Triumph Capital. And so raised the money and started Valiant. And technically we started in like November of 1989.
Was Bob Layden part of the Valiant at that time?
No. Bob, he's retconned history here a little bit, but basically a lot. He was under contract at Marvel at that time. He managed to piss somebody off there, and when his contract came up, they said, we're not renewing it, and we have no work for you. Go away. Previously, years before, he had a situation at DC where some behavior of his got him banned for life. And so he kind of had no place to go. So he came to me, kind of hat in hand, and needed a gig. Well, I needed artists, and, he's a talented guy, right? So we hired him as an inker, and I thought he would sit there at the board and ink. And I got Don Perlin from Marvel. I didn't ask him to come. He kept asking me. And I kept saying, Don, what are you, 60 something? You got retirement, you've got benefits. You want to come and work for a fragile startup that may not make it? And he said, I hate this place. It's become a snake pit again. It's no fun. It's a terrible place to work. I don't want to be there. And so finally I caved in, and I needed help. God, I needed help. And so he came, and I thought he would kind of, because an older guy, I thought, well, he'll kind of run the shop. With the inking, paste up, lettering people, and then when we actually did have a bullpen. We did have artists come in because some of them are kids right out of the Kubert School, and you had to look over their shoulder and make sure they were doing it right. So I thought he'd run that, and Layton would ink, and they kind of organically changed places. No command from me. They just, all of a sudden Layton is running the paste up people, and he was pretty good at it. And Don spent more time at the board drawing. He would help the young artists. Layton would do some inking. It was fine. It worked out well.
The characters that Valiant was holding were the gold key characters, for people who wonder what we're talking about, right?
Well, the characters the way I was able to get the funding was Richard Bernstein licensed me the gold key characters, and therefore I got the funding, and therefore we started a company. But we also developed a lot of our own. Actually, it's funny when I went to Richard, I ran into him at the American Booksellers Association right after I'd pretty much closed the financing deal, and so I walked into his booth. Western Publishing had a booth there, and I said, "Richard, I'm ready." And so his licensing guy's name was Jim Pizers, and he does this. Pizers, get over here. He was kidding. That's his
yeah.
shtick,
Yeah.
Anyway, so Pizers comes over here and he says, make a deal with this guy. And Pizers says, deal about what? He says, just do whatever he says. So I named my own deal, Pizers, wow. Okay, what's the deal? And I said, look, I don't have much money up front. I said, but we'll make it rich on the back end. If we win, we all win, So I had a really good deal for those characters, and they did well. And I was very happy to have them. I thought that they were great characters.
They're still good characters.
Yeah.
You took some of them to Dark Horse later, right?
I didn't take them. I mean, after I left Valiant, I was out of it. Eventually they went bankrupt, and of course the licenses reverted to Western somehow. Somehow or another, Dark Horse got the rights. At first, I think just to do reprints, and then they got the rights to do original. It was convenient because right about the time that they got the rights to do original work for these things, I needed a gig. I was like between engagements, and so I called Mike. I said, "You got anything for me?" And he said, "Well, funny you should ask, because I just got the Gold Key rights." He said, "You want to do it again?" And I said, "Yeah, okay." He said, "Just can't do it. This can't be Valiant Part 2." He said, "You got to do it different, completely different." He said, "It has to be true to the original, but not Valiant." And I said, "I can handle that." So I did a totally different approach, and he liked it. It was a bad time for comics, though. The market was bad. There was a lot of pirating going on. So I did like a couple of years worth, and Mike was always apologizing to me for the art. Because he'd read my script,
right,
and then he'd see what they drew, and they didn't get it all the time. Turok, the guy could draw like crazy, but he was Brazilian. He didn't speak a word of English. And so I'm sending them these scripts, and the art's coming back, and it's just nothing to do with what I asked for.
Yeah. And
so I'm trying to rewrite it to make it work with the art. And I complained to Chris Warner, who was the senior editor there, and so he looked into it, and he found out that the guy he was promised that he would have a good translator, and the translator that he was using, he would read like a whole page of my copy, and he would say to Eduardo, "They fight."
Marvel style.
Yeah. Okay. So I get, not what I asked for, but I mean, there was ups and downs, but I think that it just was a bad time for comics then.
How do you see the future? Where do you think it's going? What's its health?
Well, I think that, the movies are the dog and the comics are the tail, and it's a very small tail. The sales are terrible. I think some of the comics are just, I think they forgot what business they're in. It's supposed to be entertainment, guys. DC is doing like a lot of cheesecake. Marvel's doing a lot of social justice. I don't think there's anything you can't do. I think that's fine if you want to do it, but do it well and make it entertaining.
Right. That's job number one. Entertain the customer.
Make it entertaining and have the characters talk about their issues, not you. Not if it's the writer talking at you, or if it's a company talking at you, that's propaganda, and no one wants to read propaganda, even if you agree with it. It's boring.
Right.
So I just think that I don't know what's wrong with these people. If they called me up, I'd help them for free.
Why don't they sell comics in movie theater lobbies?
That's distribution is a really tough thing. It's the movie theater people don't want to do that. There is no existing distribution of them. The distribution that you might get would be the ID wholesaler distribution, and that's corrupt beyond imagining. It's it's the same reason. Why don't they sell wrestling books in the venues? Why didn't they sell our Nintendo comics in the toy stores with the games? Because they're not going to waste a square foot of retail.
Yeah.
On a comic book, and nobody, it's not as easy as people think. It's really.
I know it seems obvious to us, and incidentally, movie theater lobbies have stood largely empty for the last 3 years. So it's not like they're using up every square foot of space.
No, you are correct. And then if some entrepreneur, decided to put together a program to distribute to those people, fine. But you have to build it from scratch. If there's nothing existing, you can just plug in.
You seem like you roll with the punches pretty well. I don't know if that was kind of your personality anyways, or if it's something you learned just coming in young. But it seemed like whenever you had a great idea, and if it was shot down, you're like, okay, whatever, next thing. And you seem like you kind of just move on. Is that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was just trying to do the best I could. Like I said, when I came in, there was do or die because the industry was dying, and so I just thought, well, what can I do? thought of everything I could possibly do to try to make it better, to get better creators, to pay them more money, to royalties, all that stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any opposition. The president of the company, I reported to the president. I was a vice president. I reported to the president.
Yeah.
And he didn't care what I did, as long as I was making my numbers, and my deal with him. He actually thought, he told me, he says, "You're here to preside over the death of Marvel Comics." He said, "Because this is a loser business and I'm getting us out of it into animation and children's books." Yeah. And I said, "You're so wrong." I said, this can be big and we can make it big. I said, "We're going to be bigger than Disney." And he's, "Oh, baloney," and he said, basically, "Well, do whatever you want. Just, just try not to lose money." I further made the deal that if I save money or if I beat my projections, I could plow that back in. He didn't think either of those things were going to happen. He didn't think it was possible.
Right.
So he didn't. That's when he said, "I don't care what you do," And so as long as I was doing okay, doing well, I never heard from him,
Yeah.
except occasionally interference. Because if we did a Star Wars and then he couldn't read the book, but he could read a balance sheet and he could read the sales figures, and he would say, "Well, let's just do movies then." I'm like, no, it has to be a super movie,
Yeah.
So I got some bad movies stuffed down my throat, but I successfully pushed away quite a few.
Yeah.
Same with toys, G.I. Joe and Transformers work. Now we're doing Star-Years and Sectars.
Yep.
Do you read any comics these days?
I have some friends who will recommend things here and there, and also I've been reading a lot of Image stuff because gotten to know Eric Stevenson, and he's sharp. He's a good guy. He knows what he's doing, and so we became friendly, and he'll send me stacks of books, and I've read Saga. That's a long one.
Yeah.
And I read Nowhere Men and bunch of others. I can't remember.
You wanted to touch on the whole, you don't have to, just whatever you want to share about, but the New Universe saga, just because I think it's a good thing, just the way it ended up with the different creators kind of gathering around you to help you. And
yeah, the New Universe, basically, when our anniversary was coming up, a meeting was called by the PR people. It's our 25th anniversary. What are we going to do about it? So it was just the vice presidents and the PR lady and the president. And so they were going around the table and they're suggesting things like, "Oh, we could do a coffee table book." Great. That's nice. And so finally they come to me. And the first suggestion I had was something I also proposed to Jeanette Kahn once. I said, "Let's end the Marvel Universe and start again." And I said, we'll announce in January that the Marvel Universe ends on the anniversary month, right? Fantastic Four #1. And we'll orchestrate that. And it will wind to a tremendous climax where it's over, right? Next month, we start with, not a ton of them, but a bunch of new titles, the same titles. But what we do is we do it better. We do it without the stupid mistakes. We do it without Reed Richards fighting with the French underground in World War II. We do it without Iron Man having this crazy origin in Vietnam. We do it without that story Jerry Conway wrote where Hercules puts a chain on something in Lower Manhattan, tows it out to sea. Science says you're wrong. And then he tows it back using the same chain. So now the battery is up by the Bronx.
Yeah.
Get rid of
the Bronx is up and the battery's down. Everybody knows that.
Yeah. Get rid of the Spider-Mobile. Get rid of all that dumb stuff. And then do it well. Mm-hmm. And so that was shot down like crazy. I mean, like the salespeople are, "You're out of your mind. We're 70% of the market. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. You crazy." And I said, "All right, fine. Plan B." I said, "To celebrate the birth of a universe, let's start another one." And they like that. And so I walked out of there with a big budget, $250,000 for development, guaranteed royalties, marketing, blah, 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 blah. About a week later, the 6 guys who owned Cadence, Marvel, decided they're going to sell. And so the president calls me in his office and he says, you know that budget we gave you? And I said, yeah. He said, how much have you spent? That's a couple thousand. And he said, don't spend another penny. He said, I don't want to spend a nickel on this thing. And I said, you mean you don't want us to do it? He said, no, you just have to do it on staff, do it on the cheap. So if you look at the credits for the New Universe books, it's me, it's Archie Goodwin, who was a champion, and saved my life.
Yeah.
And it's a bunch of assistant editors. And the artists are not big names. They're guys who couldn't get any other work that week because I couldn't guarantee royalties. Why would Walt leave something that's doing really well and take a chance on something new that may not work unless you can guarantee he's not going to lose any income? A couple of those artists, by the way, grew up to be stars, like Will Portacio,
right,
Sierra.
John
But
Romita Jr.
They were new kids, and so we were dead on the ground before it even started, and everything was behind schedule, and it had to be done in a hurry, and it was sad. And the only good book was the one you were referring to, Starbrand. I was going to write Starbrand, and JR volunteered to pencil it. I said, "You're crazy. This is bound to fail."
Yeah,
I said, "You're on good stuff now. Stay there." He said, "No, I want to draw your book." Okay, you're crazy. That day, Al Williamson calls me up. He says, "Hey, here JR is doing your book." He says, "I want to ink it." I said, "You guys are out of your minds." But they helped me. They did it.
Yeah.
And that was great. And I there were a lot of good things about it. Archie Goodwin did a lot of the creation on those books, and some of them were excellent concepts. And at least on Starbrand, we had really pretty good art.
Yeah.
And I did the best I could. And so there were good things about it. And there were little highlight moments in it, but it was not likely to go anywhere. It was dead on the ground as far as I was concerned when, it was stillborn.
Jim has a lot of scripts and different things on his site. And as he said, you can read, you can download some of the PDFs and things, which I do recommend people check out because he has a lot of examples.
It's jimshooter.com. It's my old blog. I haven't worked on it for years, but all this stuff is still there.
Decent amount of stuff for people to see, to check it.
Some of it's fun stuff,
Yeah. Is there anywhere that you like people to stalk you online?
I really don't do much social media stuff. I mean, that's
why you're a happy person.
I guess so. I just, I'm lucky I can do email.
Yeah. So is Mike.
I knew there was a reason we got along.
Thank you for being on.
My pleasure. Anytime, guys.
We're very happy to have you.
Thank you.